everybody to understand this is the crisis we're dealing with 1.2 million times a year. Now, Dr. Levatino, you've shared your background in the abortion industry. You've described for us a second trimester abortion, but obviously you're not still in that business. Something led you to convert from being an abortionist to being today a pro-life advocate. What happened?
My wife and I met at the hospital when I was in my training program, and like a lot of other young couples, we were looking forward to raising a family, but found out pretty quickly that we had an infertility problem. And after a series of operative procedures and evaluation, it turned out my wife's infertility physician came to us and said, well, there's one more operation I can try on your wife. It's going to take an hour and a half. But when he walked out of the operating room 4 hours later, he came up to me and said, look, I never tell anybody they're not going to be able to have any children, but don't count on it. Well, we were really set on having a family, and so we set out to adopt a child. And, of course, anybody who's tried to adopt a child finds out how difficult that is. And it was during this time when we were trying to adopt a child, calling any number we could find to try to find some baby to adopt. And, by the way, the best we could do at the time was to get on a 5-year waiting list, to get on the real waiting list. It was the first time I had any doubts about doing abortions, that I was pro-choice, and I'm helping my patients. But at the same time, I'm not, I'm also not totally insensitive to the fact that the reason I can't find a child to adopt is people like me that are killing them in abortions. We were, by the grace of God, able to adopt a little girl that we named Heather in August of 1978. And as sometimes happens, after all that effort and all those years, now we had a daughter of our own, and my wife got pregnant the very next month, and now we have 2 children 10 months apart. Heather and Sean were physically and literally close, and we just, we had our family. We were great, and any qualms I had about abortion simply evaporated, and I went back to business as usual. I went into private practice, got involved in second trimester abortions, the kind of stuff that we described. Did over 1,200 abortions in my private practice, including over 100 D&Es that I described just now. But in 1984, our daughter was killed in an auto accident. And when you lose a child, I know there are a lot of parents listening, and if you have children, you may think you have some idea of what that might feel like. Believe me, if you haven't been through this, you have no idea what it feels like, and I pray to God you never find out. Losing our daughter that way, I remember doing my first D&E abortion after that a few weeks later and starting the procedure that I just described, and I got literally ill. But once you start an abortion, you can't stop. And when I finished that abortion, I know it sounds strange to people, but when I finished that abortion, for the first time after all those years and all those abortions, I wasn't thinking of what a great doctor I was, and I wasn't thinking of a wonderful right to choose, and I wasn't even thinking of the $600 cash I just made in 15 minutes. All I could see was somebody's son or daughter. And I really looked. I looked at that pile of goo on the side of the table, and all I could think of was, my God, this was somebody's son or daughter. And that was the beginning of my getting away from the abortion industry.
Wow. Well, I hope that everybody listening, in addition to recognizing the harsh reality of abortion, I hope they can also understand that many times we look at maybe the abortionist, we look at the abortion worker as the enemy, but they are not the enemy. They are victims of the enemy. And I hope that hearing Dr. Levatino share from his heart about how God gripped him through the tragedy of the loss of his child, I hope that everybody can understand that we need to pray for, have compassion for those in the abortion industry, and know that many, many more conversions, we're seeing more of them every year, more and more people can come out as the harsh reality, the crisis of abortion becomes more of an issue in our nation and as people face it on their own. Dr. Levatino, there are a lot of people right now who are on this webcast who are listening to you, and they're saying, what can I do? How can I do something to counter this abortion crisis? What would you say to that person if you were sitting across a table having a cup of coffee with them?
First thing you've got to do is educate yourself as best you can. There are so many resources between the Internet and a lot of fine books out there. I'll just mention one that I like, and that is Randy Alcorn is the author. It's called Pro-Life Answers to Pro-Choice Arguments. Because, when people have a real heart for this issue, but when people come back with what about X, Y, Z? And sometimes, they just don't know what to say. And I like this resource because it gives you a good guide as to, well, how do you counter those arguments? I'm going to give you one example. We've been fed a line, and now it's very current with Kagan wanting to go up to the Supreme Court. Kagan was telling, apparently, the ACOG, the American College of Obstetrician Gynecologists, what to put down on their policies for second trimester abortion. So much for the experts at ACOG speaking with their own voice. And we are told over and over and over again that we need partial birth abortion. Now, this is a cut above even what I just described, but we need partial birth abortion or intact DNX or intact D&E abortion. It goes by many names, so that we can save women's lives. This is what the thrust about what ACOG said. Look, I worked in a high-risk medical center for years, and I saw seriously ill women with serious problems that we had to intervene in the pregnancy to save their lives. These things do happen. I always give the example of a lady who came in with a blood pressure of 220 over 140. I mean, this is stroke level. If we don't get the pregnancy ended quickly, she is going to die. Now, here's a perfect example of somebody who needs to have the pregnancy ended. And I didn't say aborted, I said ended. Okay? Now, we're going to use partial birth abortion to save her life. Except if you are educated and you look at this and you understand that it takes 3 days to prepare a patient for partial birth abortion before you can even do the procedure, you realize how worthless partial birth abortion is in saving women's lives. This woman hasn't got 3 days. She may not have 3 hours. You do what we did. You stabilize the patient, you deliver the baby by cesarean section, and then you save both mom and the baby. And that's exactly what we did in that situation and hundreds of others. I tell people, as a professor in a medical college, I saved hundreds of women from serious problems in pregnancy. And in the process, I didn't deliberately kill a single baby. And that's where you need to be educated to be able to advance those arguments when people say the things that they say about abortion.
Well, Dr. Levatino, you've covered a lot of information. You've helped people understand the crisis of abortion. Certainly during this 1 hour, we can't go into every aspect of it. You mentioned Randy Alcorn's book, Pro-Life Answers to Pro-Choice Questions, and Randy was actually invited to be a speaker on this event but has a medical condition that recently developed that he couldn't, but he offered that his other book that he has on pro-life issues we will make available to people afterwards as a downloadable PDF, which is a quick synopsis, and I would recommend others get the resource, the Pro-Life Answers to Pro-Choice Questions. Are there any other good resources that you would recommend for people who want to learn more specifically about the abortion crisis?
You know what I would do? The best local resource, I mean, like I said, we could talk about books or websites all day long, but the best local resource that people can usually find is their local crisis pregnancy center or pregnancy assistance center. You will find people in there, volunteers, counselors, dedicated to fighting against abortion in the most positive way possible right in your own community. There are pregnancy assistance centers all across the country. And if you have a heart for this issue, get involved with your local crisis pregnancy center or pregnancy assistance center. You will learn a tremendous amount, and you will save women and babies in your own community.
Well, last but certainly not least, Dr. Levatino, for those who maybe want to learn more about you and your work, or maybe they're interested in asking you to come in and share your testimony with an organization as a speaker, where can people learn more about you and what you do?
You can. I can be reached either. I can be reached through Ambassador Speakers Agency. My wife and I do go out, and much of what we do in pro-life is supporting crisis pregnancy centers. So, in fact, we practice what we preach. We're starting one here in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
All right.
It'll officially open in 3 weeks. So if anybody wants to contact us or learn us more, go through Ambassador Speakers Agency, and you'll find that on the web, and you will find more information about us and how to contact us.
All right.